Unthinkable horrors lurk in the oily depth of roiling waves, abhorrent entities beyond our comprehension, beings only the foolhardy would dare investigate. But what is a greater weapon against an unknowable adversary than knowledge itself? Are we to declare these abominable spawn from the murk of bewilderment as unfathomable terrors never to be examined, surveyed, or engaged? Or should we contend with our primal fear of the nameless and foreign, combat the unexplained with explanations of our own? The mind is frail when battered by the terror of the extraordinary, but purpose grants it solace. Know your enemy, the proverb goes, and it rings with truth all the more so in the presence of eldritch villains with a callous indifference in their gaze.
Yep, this video is about to put the deep ones under the microscope. You might be sitting there wondering how I could take these unknowable beings and analyze them with realism in mind. Well, the deep ones are meant to be inconceivable, true, but they were conceived by a human mind. A disturbed one, but still. Additionally, they exist on our planet, abiding our laws of nature, therefore it is perfectly logical that they should conform to what we know of animals, even if their origins are unclear. To clarify, this video is about to take an analytical look at the creatures found in Lovecraft's Shadow over Innsmouth. If you'd like to know more about its literary aspect, I suggest you to also watch Athena Productions' video on the matter. This little project was done in collaboration with him, and while I trample over subtext with the grace of a walrus with a damaged cerebellum, he actually engages with it. I'll have a link with his half of the collab in the description, plus at the end of the video. Alright, let's begin. For the purpose of this video, I'm only going to refer to information presented in Shadow over Innsmouth. Even though as far as I know the deep ones are only mentioned here, it is the first Lovecraft book I ever read, so my knowledge of the mythos is limited. Oh wow, a YouTube channel focused around monsters and he doesn't read Lovecraft? What's next? He's gonna say he doesn't watch kaiju movies? Listen, he isn't well known where I live, so I heard of his work when I was attending college. I guess this is a start to catch up. Nevertheless, I'm perfectly equipped to analyze the deep ones. While the book also mentions a Shoggoth and the poster child of the entire eldritch horror genre, these creatures are the only ones with relatively detailed descriptions and distinct qualities I can evaluate. While I aim to critique the Fishman based on realism, I do not mean this as a way to degrade the book. I do believe Lovecraft put much emphasis on verisimilitude, but we should take a look at how well he succeeded if we dissect his creatures. Something we should immediately address is magic. While I deal in realism, arcane elements do not necessarily make a setting less believable if it is handled well. However, it does make my job harder, as for any issue I bring up, one could just proclaim that it is because magic. I'm not a fan of this kind of use for mythicism, but I can't really debate that beyond calling it a lazy argument. Now, the interesting thing is that despite the mentioning of otherworldly powers, we only see maybe two definitively magical abilities. One is their resistance to physical harm, unless shown the other sign, and the other is an ability to influence dreams. We could include the disturbing nature of their trinkets as the result of supernatural craftsmanship, but everything else seems to be their biological nature, so that is the angle from which I'm going to analyze them. That's enough preamble, let's actually take a look at them. Within the short story, they are described to have features of frogs and fish, but with a roughly humanoid stature. Their arms are long with webbed paws, occasionally shifting from standing upright to leaning on their hands. They have frills and gills, scales, and unblinking eyes. They hop rather than walk and are excellent swimmers. They predominantly live in the ocean, but do occasionally emerge if summoned to help their allies or to ensure oaths are kept. Their voices resemble croaking, and their faces lack expressions. Since their origins are unknown, they do not have to be genetically or evolutionarily linked to animals we know. However, they do resemble something of this world, the limitations of the human mind. Even when it comes to unfathomable horrors, we can only base them on stuff we have already experienced. If I were to actually subject them to evolution and natural selection, even that of a different planet, they have a surprisingly plausible design. In theory, having both gills and lungs is not necessarily out of the question. Contrary to popular belief, there is no amphibian that possesses both lungs and gills at the same developmental stage. They either have one or the other, or in some cases solely breathe through their skin. Lungfish, on the other hand, are prime examples of this. The Australian lungfish, to be more specific. It is an animal that can breathe through both its gills and lungs, depending on which is more convenient. Since they constantly switch from all fours to standing upright, it is easy to assume they have not really evolved to walk like humans and simply do so to free up their hands, visibly struggling with it. Hands are what I'm slightly concerned about. We could infer that their lunged-gilled ancestors frequented the land, perhaps as a refuge from predators, or a means to tap into unutilized food sources. This is a good reason for their fins to develop into leg-like limbs. Why hands though? The only reason I can imagine is the advantage granted by the use of primitive tools like twigs or rocks. These can be used to crack open nuts or shellfish, perhaps harass a few crabs out of their hiding holes. A bit improbable, but not impossible. Obtaining hands would be a clear way they could gain a heightened level of intelligence, leading to sentience. Since they retain their semi-aquatic lifestyle, their ridges and slippery skin are fine to have. On the other hand, unblinking eyes aren't. For any length of time they spend on land, they can have dust or sand or little bits of glass blown into their eyes. Those lids would be invaluable. There we have our first definitive flaw. Still related to their dual existence is their speech. In the story they are revealed to have a specific language, most resembling animalistic noises. It is a good thing they do not speak any human language, as their features would make that quite a difficult feat, especially since fish, amphibians and reptiles have no lips. Now, on a different world this might not be the case, but this is a safer option. However, noises made on the surface with vocal cords or alternatives are not something that can be replicated underwater. This simply means they need to have two ways to emit sound. Fish have voices too, so it is perfectly possible. We would not be able to efficiently hear them though. Not a flaw, just a potential addition to their lore, I guess. When it comes to their biology, there is still one massive veil of a feature we have to tackle: their reproduction. When it comes to traditional baby making, the limit is the sky. Eggs, roe, a womb, anything goes, as nothing is specified when two deep ones love each other very much. A lot more is detailed though when a deep one fancies a human. Yes, the pact with the fish people often leads to them forcing humans to mate with them. This would only be a weird kink would it not produce the most peculiar offspring. There seems to be a 50-50 chance that the result of this union is a regular human or a future deep one. These larvae gradually take on the appearance of their marine progenitors, referred to as the Innsmouth look. When they come of age, they begin to practice swimming and will one day join their kin in the depths and live forever. Let's put a pin into the immortality part for a sec. Interspecies breeding. That's, well, an obstacle to say the least. Now, certain aspects of this are not as impossible as you may think. From the fact that they existed prior to mythic humans, we can assume that this is just an auxiliary method for reproduction, perhaps a weird cultural thing, like with the incredibly creepy DNA draining Asari everyone seems to be okay with. We are also told that female deep ones are sent up here to sire children, or at the very least we have no confirmation of male ones. This plays to our advantage. Let me introduce to you the Prussian carp. This is one of the species which can reproduce asexually using the sperm of other fish. Yes, you heard it right. Eggs laid by the Prussian carp contain all the necessary ingredients to create a clone of the mother. In case there is no male carp to fertilize them, that's no problem. The seed of other fish activates the eggs, as if they were fertilized, initiating the growth of the clone. Quite terrifying, especially since these carps are an invasive species, threatening the ecosystem of many countries. Oh, and one more thing. These clones have a chance to become males, therefore presenting a possibility for essentially an all-female population to begin sharing their DNA, averting inbreeding problems. In theory, deep one eggs could also be fertilized in such a way using human gunk. This does restrict them to using fish eggs within their bodies, keeping them wet there, but it is all fine and dandy at this point. Well, fine in the context of alien fish women forcing humans to mingle with them. Surprisingly, even the metamorphosis is kind of justified to some extent. Let's say that the newborn tadpoles of the Deep Ones roughly resemble a human. The Innsmouth look is often described with the fishy eyes, developing gills and disproportionate limbs. What if in their infancy their skin is pink and their metamorphosis from larva to adult lasts several decades? They do not initially leave land as they are handicapped by being born there, having to learn swimming instead of instinctually being capable. There are two key problems though. Unfortunately, it seems that these larvae at the beginning seem human entirely, evidenced by the protagonist and the youth of Innsmouth, although time that has to pass for them to embrace their fishy nature seems to be up to chance. Additionally, some children seemingly at random are born completely human. It might sound surprising, but hybridization requires pretty similar genetics, and whether or not the Deep Ones evolved on Earth, they are pretty far from a smooth skin by the looks of it. So close, yet so far. Unfortunately, we found our second flaw, and it's a biggie. If I were to advise Lovecraft on what to change to make the Deep Ones completely realistic, I'd make it so the Innsmouth look is there from birth, getting marginally fishier as time goes on, and remove the chance for human kids. I'd also tell him to omit the racist undertone of some sections, but I doubt he would listen. Naturally, this is one aspect where you could say it's magic, and I wouldn't be opposed to the idea. Nevertheless, I do find the highly biological nature of the whole ordeal odd if it is indeed magic. We still have the immortality pinned. If we exclude the arcane means, this is very likely to be impossible. No complex animal that we know is immune to the passage of time. Entropy takes its toll on everyone. Mistakes in cell mitosis becoming more and more frequent, previous problems mounting up, the inability to produce new neurons paired with a myriad issues that a complicated life form has to face always lead to one outcome. Perhaps they evolved to be immortal. Alas, I do not know how they would do that. These are all the aspects I can comment on. I would be rather interested in their architectural methods under the sea, or metallurgy. I mean, that can also be magic, but I'd rather have some more interesting techniques. All in all, a lot more realistic than expected prior to reading the book. I give them 7 inconsistent narrations out of 10 objects described as queer. Don't forget to check out what Athena Productions did for the occasion. Probably has more to do with the actual qualities of the story. Also hope to see you in my next video. I'll flash for a quick second on what monster I'll dissect next. Weird, huh? Well, hope to see you next time. Bye!